This morning, an interesting reality on those punishing Texas temperatures.
You said that Texas requires animal shelters to be air conditioned, but not prisons. Is that true?
State Rep Carl Sherman says it's not just inmates, but prison guards who remain in jeopardy. And will Sherman run for U.S. Senate? Former State Rep Matt Krause getting back into politics.
We planned to take a break for a long while. People had asked us about running for different things.
Why he's running for office again, and the role he thinks that he played in eliminating DEI in Texas. Congressman Joaquin Castro taking a page from Republican lawmakers, planning a trip to the border Tuesday, blasting Governor Abbott for disregarding private property rights and inhumane treatment of asylum seekers. And is Ken Paxton violating the gag order in his impeachment trial? He's saying things Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick ordered those involved not to say.
Inside Texas Politics with Jason Whiteley starts now.
Good Sunday morning. Let's start the program here with the top political headlines happening across our state. Texas A&M reached a big settlement with that black journalism professor it wanted to hire, then backed out on. A&M paid Kathleen McElroy $1 million. The university reneged on an offer to her after conservatives questioned McElroy's experience in diversity, equity, and inclusion. The chancellor apologized to McElroy and to Professor Joy Alonzo, another professor there. She was put on admin leave, you might remember, for remarks she made about Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick recently. The chancellor said an internal report discovered some bad decision-making at A&M. An unusual scene with a Texas congressman at a rodeo recently. Congressman Ronnie Jackson was briefly detained by law enforcement while trying to help a 15-year-old girl who suffered a medical emergency. Jackson was the White House doctor for Presidents Barack Obama and Donald Trump. Cops in Carson County, Texas, just outside Amarillo, detained Jackson briefly. It's still, though, uncertain right now exactly why they made that decision. And the ACLU is suing Texas over its new state law that would criminalize some drag shows around children. The ACLU filed the suit on Wednesday. It argues that Senate Bill 12 is too vague, gives police and prosecutors too much discretion to decide what is legal or not. And they say it could criminalize everything from pride parades to bachelorette parties. The law is supposed to go into effect next month. This week is the deadline for Texas to tell a court why it has the authority to keep a blockade of buoys in the Rio Grande. The federal government sued, asking a court to remove those buoys. A decision in that case could come as early as next week. But on Tuesday of this week, a group of Democratic congressmen are going to see this for themselves. Congressman Joaquin Castro, a San Antonio Democrat, is leading that group. Congressman Castro, welcome back to the program here. This congressional delegation trip to the border is a page right out of the Republican playbook. I mean, I can't tell you how many times we've seen Republican lawmakers down on the border posing for photos, having press conferences about what's going on. But you want your trip to show something else.
Yeah, we're going down to meet with community members, with property owners and stakeholders, with CBP, and to really inspect what's going on with Operation Lone Star. Because, as you know, Governor Abbott instructed that razor wire and these barrel traps with concertina wire be placed along the banks of the Rio Grande. There have now been at least 2 deaths, it looks like, related to those what I call death traps or drowning devices that the governor ordered to be installed. And so this group of members of Congress is going to go down there, take a look for ourselves at what's going on, and also talk to the community about the impact of Operation Lone Star on the community in Eagle Pass.
Congressman, I've heard about the death of the person who was caught up in the buoys. Has there been a second one as well?
It looks like there are 2 folks who have died. One of them is a child from Honduras. And this is something that was completely avoidable. It's something that many of us warned about in the last few weeks when Governor Abbott made the decision to put these drowning devices in the river. There's wire that people get trapped in. Folks had already been trapped before this, so the governor had noticed that this was going to be a problem. And I know that border security obviously in Texas is a huge issue. We've got 1,200 miles of border with Mexico, so it's always going to be an issue for us. But there's a right way to do things and a wrong way to do things. and you still have to treat people like human beings. And to put razor wire in the water, to put these what look like chainsaw blades in the middle of those barrels, to not offer water to people that may be dying of thirst in 105, 110 degree weather, that goes beyond the pale, I think, of what most Texans consider fair to do to human beings. Unfortunately, Greg Abbott is still doing it, and I hope the Department of Justice will be able to stop him soon.
Congressman, of course, the Department of Justice is going to court trying to get those buoys removed from the Rio Grande, saying that the river is overseen by the Corps of Engineers. Is there anything else that the federal government can do on its end to intercede here?
I hope that I believe the lawsuit will be successful. I do think they'll be able to get an injunction because Greg Abbott doesn't have authority over an international body of water, just like the governor of California doesn't have authority over the Pacific Ocean. So I think that lawsuit will be successful, but they need to hurry with that.
Last time we spoke, you wanted President Biden and the White House to come out and be more forceful and make a statement about what is happening here with Texas Department of Public Safety troopers treating asylum seekers inhumanely. We have not yet heard that from the White House. Are you satisfied with what's going on in D.C.?
You know, the White House spokesperson has now twice made comments, first about what happened a few weeks ago with the razor wire and so forth. And then I think yesterday about the family separation that has now been revealed. But I still think it's important for the President of the United States to be able to forcefully condemn this kind of behavior, this kind of conduct. And, you know, that's separate. I know the DOJ is doing its job and they've gone to court and that's part of the administration. But the words of a president matter and they make a difference on an issue. They make a difference about how Americans see issues. And so I still hope that the president will say something.
Congressman, thank you for the time. We appreciate it.
Good to be with you.
Ken Paxton had some editing to do on his website. Last week, we pointed out that Paxton was violating the gag order in the impeachment trial by calling the upcoming event a kangaroo court. You can see it there on screen. That phrase, though, directly violates the gag order established by Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick. Patrick forbids anyone involved in the trial from using inflammatory language like that. Paxton did remove the language after we pointed it out to come into compliance. Coming up next, will State Rep Carl Sherman walk away from the Texas House to run for U.S. Senate against Ted Cruz? A question we will ask him. And former State Rep Matt Krause getting back into politics, the position he now wants, and the political record that he hopes gets him there. Inside Texas Politics, back in a moment. Welcome back to Inside Texas Politics. You know, temperatures are punishing this Texas summer, maybe nowhere more than the housing units in dozens of Texas prisons. This is not just about inmates in state custody. It's about the guards who work there and the struggle to hire them. State Rep Carl Sherman wants Governor Abbott to call a special session to fix this and cool prisons down. He's a Democrat from DeSoto. Representative Sherman, it's good to see you again. I want to start with something you said. You said that Texas requires animal shelters to be air conditioned, but not prisons. Is that true?
That is very true. As a former city manager, I can tell you firsthand, we were required to have air conditioned for our animal shelters. And if we didn't, someone's going to jail.
You want Governor Abbott to call a special session to address this. Where do you see these efforts going? Because neither Abbott nor any previous legislatures have acted on this.
Well, I know the governor has a lot on his plate, and I'm certainly not the governor, and I know that he has 30 million constituents, and they all have priorities that they are asking for him to be concerned about. I'm just asking for some humanity in this situation where we've got 128,000 souls in our custody, where we're not providing AC at all the prisons.
Representative, there will be people watching this who say, listen, we should not be making it easy on criminals because they're in there for a reason. How do you respond to that?
Well, they're exactly right. We shouldn't be. And this is not about making it a hotel. This is also about our public safety officers who work inside our prisons, where we're having a hard time keeping good people. These public safety officers are risking their lives to keep our communities safe, and I'm sick and tired of them not getting the compensation nor the care that they deserve. If this was a work environment in the public, we would come in and shut it down. It's just not right to have these public safety officers working in these conditions. And as a former city manager and mayor, I'll tell you this, I would send out ambulances. Our fire department would go out also not just for those citizens who are incarcerated, but also for those who are correctional officers who have to wear the gear, go up and down these stairs in metal buildings where the temperatures, according to Texas A&M, are rising sometimes up to 130 degrees north.
Representative, there's been a lot of talk about you might be launching a campaign for U.S. Senate. When will you decide that?
That's a good question. You know, it's really coming down to, is this what I feel God is calling me to do? And for me, it means, Jason, that I can't be anxious for anything. I know that there are a lot of good folks out there who have pledged to me, they're supporting me if I decide to run. However, and I know they're concerned, well, other folks are making commitments, and if you wait too late, it's too late. Well, you know, if God is calling you to do something, then it's never too late. And so it could be any day now, and I realize that there is a time clock, right, before.
Could it be today?
No.
All right. Representative, thank you for the time. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Jason.
In Fort Worth, a veteran county commissioner is retiring, and at least one well-known name is running to replace him. Matt Krause is running for the seat that Commissioner Gary Fickus is vacating. Krause, of course, is a Republican who served in the state legislature and more recently has run for other positions. We spoke to him right after his announcement. Matt, it's good to see you again. You served in the legislature. You ran briefly for Attorney General. You ran for the Tarrant County District Attorney's Office. Why do you now want to serve on the county commission there in Tarrant County?
Yeah, Jason, it's great to see you again and be with you. And you're right. My family and I, we'd planned to take a break for a long while. People had asked us about running for different things. We just said, no, you know, we're very content not being in office, not being on the ballot. But Tarrant County is such a consequential county, not only for the state, but for the country. And so when we had folks like County Judge Tim O'Hare and Commissioner Fickus and others come to us, who's the outgoing commissioner, and say, hey, we think you would do a really good job here. We think your skill set fits here really well. Tarrant County needs you. We'd love to have you run for this spot that my family and I, Jenny and I and the kids, we thought about and prayed about and thought, okay, this is a place where we could serve.
I want to ask you about something else you were known for in the legislature, and that is for investigating library books at public schools when you were the chair of the House General Investigating Committee. Some of those books that you were looking into, it's been reported, and we've seen the list, were ones that involved racism, Black Lives Matter, LGBTQ issues, et cetera. Since you left the legislature, Texas has now passed laws eliminating DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. I'm curious if you think that your initial questions on library books sparked some of these most recent efforts.
You know, it's been funny seeing some local papers in Texas and then some national papers say this is the guy responsible for all these book inquiries and all of this. I don't go nearly so far. I think the parents are the ones who are responsible for it. Again, we were just acting on some of the new laws that had been passed that session that I was chairman of General Investigating, that had to do with race issues and human sexuality issues. But I think it was much bigger than just one person or one thing. It was a confluence of a lot of factors, the letter maybe being one of those, but parents were upset. Other people had gotten involved. Jared Patterson, who's here in the North Texas area, kind of really took this issue and led on it and ran with it during this current legislative session, and was the one who drafted the legislation, the most far-reaching and compelling legislation in the entire country on keeping inappropriate books out of schools. And so I think he deserves a lot of the credit for it. I think our list played a role in it, but by no means was the factor. There were multiple factors in that, but I was honored to be a part of that fight.
What role do you think that your list played in that, looking back?
You know, I think it was kind of a touchstone. I was at a conference a couple of weeks ago, and some people from Massachusetts recognized me and said, hey, you're the guy with the book list from Texas, huh? And I said, yeah, that was us. And they said, thank you. It helped us and our communities really dig in and see if those books needed to be in our libraries. And so I think it started the conversation. It really took off like a wildfire after that. We never anticipated it to have the reach that it did. So I think maybe it was a spark as a part of this larger conversation. It gave folks tangible things that they could do and go look for some of these maybe problematic books. So I would say maybe it was a spark, but people have taken it and worked on it in an incredible fashion since then.
Matt, we always appreciate the time. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Great talking with you.
Straight ahead here on Inside Texas Politics, some Texas Republicans were slow to react to Donald Trump's indictment over the January 6th riot and interfering in the 2020 election. But Trump still leads the polls, so what does this mean? A question for the roundtable in just a moment. And a reminder to keep up with Texas politics during the week. Subscribe to our podcast. It's called Y'all-itics. New content, fresh interviews, episodes drop every Sunday morning, wherever you get your podcasts.
This is Inside Texas Politics with Jason Whiteley.
Time now for Reporters Roundtable to put the headlines in perspective. Joining us this week, Ashley Godot, anchor and managing editor of political content at KVUE News in Austin. Bud Kennedy is here, columnist from the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, and Bernadine Steptoe, of course, political producer at WFAA in Dallas. Bud, let's start with you. Texas Republicans were slow to react to Donald Trump's most recent indictment last week. What do you make of that?
Well, it was an interesting game, Jason. It was like they wanted to say, how can we tweet or comment about Joe Biden and the DOJ without defending Trump? Some of them made comments about the DOJ or the indictment without even mentioning Trump's name at all. It's like they wanted to stay away from him.
And actually, that is an interesting point. They didn't defend Trump. They kind of went on the attack against the DOJ.
Well, I think they have to walk a very fine line because Trump is still polling so high. I mean, in terms of the Republican primary, it almost seems like a landslide at this point for him. And so I think that there is always concern among Texas Republicans about the base and what the base is going to think. And right now, you just can't talk bad about Trump if you're a Republican.
Bernadine, that's so true. But at the end of the day, why say anything if you're some of these Republican candidates? Do they feel they have to send out some statement?
Well, and I think that they think that it's easier to attack President Biden. And then how many times do you say the same thing over and over and over to defend former President Trump? So I think now they're just waiting to see how things work out and at the same time take a swipe at President Biden, which works for their base.
And speaking of, go ahead, Bud, you wanted to add something?
Jason, I was going to say it was interesting to see that even some of the Trumpiest members of Congress from Texas didn't mention or didn't say anything favorable about Trump. Even Congresswoman Van Dyne vaguely mentioned his name, but just talked about Biden and the DOJ. On the other hand, Lance Gooden from North Texas called it a witch hunt.
Ashley, let's shift off to another Republican in court last week, and that's Ken Paxton, the suspended Texas Attorney General. He was in Houston in criminal court there for the 2015 securities fraud charges against him. But once again, that trial is delayed, and both sides agreed this time. Let's let the impeachment trial happen first, because the outcome of the impeachment trial in the Texas Senate could likely influence what happens in the criminal case in Houston.
And I think that that's so interesting, Jason, that they're deciding to say, okay, well, we all agree we're going to wait and see how the impeachment plays out before we even set the dates for the upcoming trial. Because, the thought process being if he is removed from office or if the Senate, finds him guilty of these charges, that makes a difference because his political career is in their minds then over and shows that he wants to resolve these criminal charges. And that just makes me say, so if his political career is not over and the Senate doesn't decide to remove him, then what are you going to do with this case?
Yeah, it sounds like they're going to keep fighting it, Bud. But as Ashley said, for the first time, Paxton's own attorneys floated the idea of a possible settlement, plea bargain, resolution, something.
Well, I'm confused about this because, the securities case was set aside from the impeachment and won't be heard as part of the impeachment until a later date, they said. So, what is going on with this? We've delayed it on both sides, and is that ever going to come to trial?
And that's a question that we asked down in Houston, Bernadine, a few days ago. Is it ever going to go to trial? Because it's been languishing for 8 years, and attorneys on both sides are insistent something will happen soon.
Well, I think it's going to go to trial if we see an impeachment from if Paxton is impeached or not. But I think that if he is removed from office, it will have an impact on that securities case, because if he's impeached, he is more likely, this is what they're thinking, that he's more likely to take a plea or want to dissolve or get rid of that case. But I think that they're going to have to resolve it. It's not going to go away. And he's either going to have to plead it or he's going to have to take it to trial. And that's something, because it hasn't gone away. It's still there after all of these years. And I don't think that anybody thinks it's just gonna disappear.
Bud, earlier in the program here, we talked about the changes to the website he made for violating the gag order, but then we heard the other day, Tony Busby, Paxton's own attorney, on the Mark Davis show in Dallas. How does that not violate the gag order? They
continue to talk in violation of the gag order. They're completely ignoring it, and the lieutenant governor won't do anything about it. This is somebody who's free on $35,000 felony bond, has been all this time, and he's just spitting in the face of the justice system.
But Jason, you know what? It begs you to wonder what kind of power that Lieutenant Governor Patrick has. Because if he just sits back and let Paxton continue to violate that gag order, how much influence is he going to have once that impeachment trial starts?
Good point. Ashley, final word.
Even for how much do they respect the gag order? How much do they respect this process? How much, are they actually going to take this seriously? I mean, they've continually filed motions to dismiss the charges. Right. I think it's really going to be interesting to see what happens day one of the trial, before opening statements, when all the rulings, all these motions gets decided.
And that's coming up next month. Guys, thanks so much. Ashley, Bud, Bernardine, we appreciate it as always. Thank you for watching as well. We're back next Sunday to take you inside Texas politics and hope you can join us then. Take care.